for you. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video if you're on our screen, to the right of the video if you are on a larger screen. All right. So bear with me here just a second. All right. So yeah, get your questions in there. All right. Sorry, just trying to get this page up. For some reason, it's all not loading properly. All right. So I think we got it now. Okay. So we will start here with John K. Says, how do you vary distance out of greenside bunker? What do you change when you want to hit it farther or closer with the same club? I use a 60 degree. All right. So I always think it's interesting when I get this question because I think the answer is kind of surprises people a little bit. So the answer is the same way you vary the distance with any other shot, right? So you're either going to vary the distance with the amount of speed that you are delivering to the ball, right? So the amount of speed that you're delivering to the sand, right? And or the loft of the club, right? So using a long or a less lofted club will make the ball go farther. So just like an 8-iron goes farther than a 9-iron, right? Because an 8-iron has less loft on it. A driver goes farther than a 3-wood. A driver has less loft on it, right? So that's part of what you do. So here's how I recommend like varying the distance. What I would do is I would, you're using a 60 degree from your greenside bunker, right? So what I would do is I would see how far you hit your 60 degree. A full blast, like you hit it, not you hit it as hard as you can, but you basically are just taking a full swipe at it, right? And you see how far that goes. So a bunker blast shot where we open up the club face, we hit behind the ball, the sand behind the ball, right? And we come in and we see how far that goes. So for me, for like a 60 degree, I would say 20 yards is probably my max comfortably, maybe 25 if I really get after one, right? Maybe a little bit different for you, but that's what it is for me. So if I have a shot that is more than that 20 yards, I need to use a less lofted club. So what I would do is I would take my next wedge, right? So for me, I go 58, then I go 54. I would take my 54 and I would see, okay, how far do I hit my 54 max? All right. And then I keep going on and so forth. The last time I played, I had a really long bunker shot. We have this par 5 where it's got like a bunker that kind of goes, it's like a huge bunker that goes along the right side of the green and even way short of the green. And I went for the green in 2 and I just didn't catch it right. It kind of hit a little, weak kind of fade. I kind of hit it off the heel a little bit, ended up in that bunker and ended up, about, 40 yards short of the green. Right. Or I had about 40 yards to the flag. Well, I mean, if I would have hit my 60 degree, even if I would have taken a full swing, I would have probably ended up in the bunker again. Right. Even if I would have caught it perfectly. So I actually had to hit a 50 degree wedge, my 50 degree out of it. I just hit it the same way. I just opened up the face, just took a full swing at it, and I hit it to about 12 feet and had a chance, still had a chance for birdie, right? Didn't make the putt, unfortunately, but that's the way it goes sometimes. So, but that's what you have to do. You can do this with a 9-iron. I mean, I would just kind of try to see how far. 9-iron, I could probably hit 80 to 90 yards if I had to guess, like a bunker blast kind of shot. All right, so that's that. Now it's not going to get super high, right? But that would be a way that you can do it. Now to hit shorter, right? So let's say I have a 15-yard bunker shot. Well, I know that that's less than a full blast shot. So I would do it the same way that I would hit a wedge shot. So if I have if I'm 100 yards out, that'd be pretty close to like a full 54 degree for me, right? So if I have 80 yards out, how do I hit it 80 yards? Well, I hit 80 yards by taking a little bit off of it. I don't quite hit a full shot. I take like a 3/4 swing. I would do the same thing in the bunker, right? I'm going to take less of a swing. If I have a 5-yard bunker shot, it's going to be even less of a swing from that. And to know how hard to hit it, that is a skill that you have to train, right? So what I'd recommend doing for those ones where they're gauged shots is I would practice hitting bunker shots different lengths with varying speeds, right? So a way that you can do this is go to your bunker, right? And hopefully your course has something like this. It's going to be difficult to develop skill without some sort of practice with it. So if you don't practice it, then you can't really expect to be very good at it, right? So what I would do is I would set cones up or something as a towel. I like to use towels sometimes, but I place it on the green every you know so many yards, and then practice hitting to those different lengths by varying the length. And don't hit it to the same one every time. Go to one, then go to a different one, then go to a different one, then go to a different one. Right. So that way you're practicing and learning the skill of varying your speed. But it's the same way. The other way is how much of the ball that you take. Right. So if you take less sand, you're going to catch more ball. The ball's going to go a little bit farther. Right. Um, but there's associated risk with that, right? The closer you get to the ball, the closer you're going to be to sculling it out. So I don't generally, if you're asking this question, you probably don't have the skill of being able to vary how well you hit how much the sand, right? So I would say probably stick to the same amount of sand, right? And stick to the same kind of bunker shot. And then once you get kind of good at varying control there, then you can start varying. Okay, how close you hit the ball? How does that affect how far the ball goes? All right, so let's keep going. So Bob says this question may be too elementary for some, but I'm not clear. I've heard from a couple different places that one cause of losing posture is an open club face, and I guess I can see that if the logic is that my kinesthetic sense is so finely tuned that I can feel that the club face is open, small muscles, and I need to stand up and flip big muscles in order to square it. Seems like if I'm that perceptive, the big muscles ought to be easier ones to control. Am I thinking correctly about this, or am I just missing questions? So let me explain it this way. You're exactly right. An open club face is often a root cause to coming up out of the posture, but it doesn't necessarily mean that if you get your club face more closed that you're going to suddenly start staying in your posture. It will incentivize you to do so, right? So let me explain exactly why an open face causes this, right? So what we want to understand first is that lag, if we have lag on the club, right, meaning the club is behind your hands, right? When I'm coming out, this is lagging, and then this would be releasing, right? So when the club is lagging, that club face is open. Lag opens the face, right? Release closes the face, right? So lag is a mechanism to open the face, and release is a mechanism to close the face, right? So if you think about it this way, if I have my club face like this, imagine you're kind of like you're a worm looking up. You got a worm's eye view here, right? And you're looking from like where the golf ball is sitting. This club face is open, and then I keep the lag on the club. That club face is going to stay open, right? Or I can be here and I can stall my body, stand up, and release, and now that club face gets back to square, right? Now, if you think about it this way, let's say that this face is square, right? And then I stand up and release it. Now look at that club face is closed, right? Because I've released it, right? So if this club face is square, I can turn, and now I can have lag on the club and keep that face square, right? So this is what tour players do, right? That's what the tour players do. So that's what we have to understand. So if I'm coming down and my club face is open, your brain, here's what's happening. Here's what your brain is doing. Your brain, you're talking about controlling the big muscles versus the small muscles. I'm not like an expert in how well the brain controls different muscles or things like that. So I can't really speak on that. That might be like a better question for like a neuroscientist or something like that. But what I do know is that you're trying to hit the ball in the direction of the target, right? And your brain is trying to help you to do that, right? So what you're doing what you may find is that when the club face is open, your brain is trying to come up with a solution to get the ball to go in the direction of the target. And the solution oftentimes is to release the club, right? Because from here, this is the most, you know, the most it's the solution that I find most people choose the most, right? Is to release it, is to get here and release it earlier so that way they can square it up. Because if they're here and this face is open and they were to stay in their posture and rotate through the ball, well, that face would just stay open and the ball is going to go way to the right. Well, that's not what you want to do. You want to hit the ball that way, even if you have to flip to do it. And I will tell you, it is a much, much, much better alternative. It's way better to have an open face and stand up and release it and hit the ball toward the target than to have an open face, stay in your posture like a pro, but leave the club face open and hit it a mile to the right. Because that first golfer is going to hit it in the direction of the target. That second golfer is going to hit it out of bounds, right? Or in the trees or way off target, right? Golf is a game of getting the ball in the hole to get it to go in the direction that you want. It's not a game of staying in your posture, right? It's a game of getting the ball in the hole. So if we want to stay in our posture, we have to be incentivized to do so. And in order to be incentivized to do so, you have to have the club face in a good spot. So a way that you can look at this is to look at your swing on video and look at the last parallel position in the swing. Last parallel. So some people may call this P6, position 6, right? So last parallel in the downswing. And what you want to see is this club face angled down toward the ground in some amount, right? So whether it's like that, or it's just slightly, or like that, that's fine. But if it's angled toward the sky in any amount, that face is open. And generally, you're either going to stay in your posture good and hit the ball way to the right, or you're going to stand up to release it. So what you need to do is get the face more closed. And the way that you do that is by virtue of getting, there's two ways you can do it, really. One is to just use a stronger grip. If I make the same, so if I'm coming down like this, right, that face is pointing up to the sky a little bit, and then I just take the grip and I make it stronger in my hand. Well, now look, that I make the exact same swing. Now my face is closed, right? That's one way to do it, is to strengthen the grip. The other way is to strengthen the wrist angles, right? So again, if I'm in this same position where the club's parallel to the ground, my face is open, and then I do that and I strengthen my wrist angles, that's another way to do it. This way is much more difficult than just changing your grip. One is a setup thing. One is something that you dynamically have to do in your swing, and it's not very intuitive for the overwhelming majority of golfers, right? So I recommend just strengthening your grip. That's what we do in the 20-minute challenge fix. That's what Clay goes over in the 20-minute challenge fix. That's what I highly recommend doing. Now, if you look at yourself on video and you also see the club head out here, which most likely you probably will if you are someone who has an open club face, because an open club face also leads to, a lot of times it leads to a steep downswing. And that steep downswing also makes it difficult to stay in your posture, because when the club's coming down steep, you will tend to stand up out of it as a means to shallow it, because standing up also helps you to shallow out the club, right? If I'm like this and the club's coming down steep and then I do that, look what happens to the shaft. Now it shallows out, right? And again, I'd much rather have the golfer that stands up out of it, shallows out the club, squares up the face, than to have the golfer that comes down steep, open face, because that there's no telling where that ball's going. It could go anywhere, right? That first golfer is going to be able to get the ball to go in the direction of the target. Now, is it the way that the tour players do it? No, it's not. But it's at least a functional way to get the ball to go toward your target. I would venture to say, very low handicap golfers that do this exact same thing. I used to be one of them, right? And I still do it a fair amount, right? But I don't do it near as much as I used to, because I've worked on it, right? So 20-minute shallowing fix, if you're someone who stands up out of your posture, the 20-minute shallowing fix is most likely the very first thing that you need to do. Now, it's not necessarily going to stop you from coming up out of your posture, but it's going to incentivize you to do so, right? Or it should help you to minimize it, because let's say now I have this club more closed, right? And I have this club in a more shallow position. Well, if I stand up and then also release, right? One, the club's going to be too shallow because I stood up. That helps me to shallow the club. And then if I release, now the face is going to be too closed. Everything's going to go left and left, right? And that's the same thing. Your brain, that's the opposite basically of what your brain was trying to stop you to do before. Your brain was trying to stop you to go from right and right. And now if we get the club face in a better position, the club shallowing out, if you were to actually stand up out of your posture, you're going to go left and left, right? So you actually now have an incentive to stay in your posture, because if you do, you will hit a shot in the direction of the target, right? So most of the time what your brain is doing is it's trying to help you to hit the ball. It's trying to help you to reach your goal of hitting the ball in the direction of the target. So hopefully that makes sense. So 20-minute shallowing fix is what I would recommend if you are in that kind of position. To get to the course, click the instruction tab, then click the 20-minute shallowing fix from there. All right, bear with me. I'm going to get a quick refill on my drink here, and then we'll keep going. All right. All right, let's keep going here. So Ron says, do I have to sacrifice shaft lean to hit a straighter ball? I have shaft lean and flattening, but I'm hitting huge draws, starting right, but turning hard. What is the best way to straighten out? Your face is just too closed, if that is the case. So here's what we want to understand. If you're hitting the ball, and this is assuming you're hitting the ball in the center of the face. We can talk about that as well, since we don't have a lot of questions, and I'll address that afterwards. But let's just say you're hitting the ball solidly in the center of the face, okay? If you are doing that and the ball is curving too much, or it's curving in the wrong direction, you need to change the direction the club face is pointing at impact. The easiest way to do that is to weaken or strengthen the grip, to change the grip, right? That's the easiest way to do that. Because let's say in your situation, the face, you're over curving it, right? It's curving too much, right? So the easiest way to change that, if you made the exact same swing and then had a weaker grip, well, the face would be more open. The ball's not going to curve as much, right? So that's what I would do first, is I would weaken your grip, right? So that means for a right-handed golfer, getting the lead hand to move more toward the side of the club instead of on top, and then the trail hand to be more on the side of the club instead of under, right? So that's taking the grip and going from here to there a little bit, some amount, right? So I would try a little bit, and if it's still hooking, then I try a little bit more. If it's still hooking, I try a little bit more, right? The other thing is to change the wrist angles. If I see this sometimes because there's lots of videos and instruction out there, right? It says, okay, strengthen your grip. And then it says, okay, bow your wrist. Well, you can't really do both of those things. I mean, you can, but the face is more than likely going to be too close, right? So imagine I have a strong grip, lead hand on top, trail hand under, right? So that'd be considered a pretty strong grip, right? And then I'm coming down into contact and my wrist is bowed. Well, look at that club face. It is so closed. There is no amount of shaft lean that I could really get to be able to. I mean, look, I have my hands way far forward than any tour player does at impact, and the face is still extremely closed, right? So basically what it comes down to is, if you have a weaker grip, bowing your wrist is something you're likely going to need to do in order to have a pro-like impact, right, with shaft lean. If you have a stronger grip, you can actually afford to have a little bit of cupping in your wrist. Now, you can't be too excessive with it. If you're too excessive with it, the face will still be too open, but you can afford to have a little bit. An example of this is Matthew Fitzpatrick. Matthew Fitzpatrick has a very strong grip. He has cupping in his wrist as he comes through impact, and his lead wrist. So he comes through impact, he has a little bit of cupping in there. So what I mean by cupping is that's cupping, and then that's bowing, right? The technical terms are, this is wrist extension, this is wrist flexion, right? So those are kind of the things that you're going to run into. If you have a more neutral grip, you're going to have more neutral wrist angles. You're going to be more on the flatter side, right? So Tiger Woods is an example of that. Tiger Woods has a neutral grip. He has a flat wrist at the top of his swing. He actually bows his wrist a little bit as he's coming down, and then as he comes to impact, it kind of flattens out again. He releases some of that bow, right? And then the net face is square, right? So that's how he does it. Okay, so there's different ways of doing it, but that's the way that he does it. So, but what I would say in your situation, if the face is or if the ball is curving too much or it's curving in the wrong direction, then you need to change the club face. Easiest way to change the club face is with the grip weakening or strengthening it, right? Now, let's say you're trying to hit a draw, but you're slicing it, or let's go the opposite. Let's say you're trying to hit a little fade, but you are actually, we went over. Basically, what I'm trying to say is if the ball's curving too much, you need to change the grip. If it's curving in the wrong direction, you need to change the grip, right? So if you're trying to hit a draw and it's slicing, then you need to get the face more closed. Taking a stronger grip is the way you want to go, right? So now let's say that the ball is curving the amount you want, right? So let's say you're trying to hit a baby draw, and you are hitting a baby draw, but the problem is that it's going in the wrong direction still. It's still too far right or too far left, right? Well, then we need to change the direction that we're swinging, right? So let's say I'm hitting, I want to hit a little baby draw, and my ball is starting too far to the right. It's baby drawing back, right? It's drawing a little bit back, but it's just starting way too far to the right. Well, that means you're just swinging too far to the right. So you need to swing more to the left, right? So if that is, I'm just talking about hypothetical situation, but I would say in your situation, you just need to weaken the grip, and that will more than likely get you to where you need to go. Now, if when you weaken the grip, it's still, it's now you get it curving in the right direction and it's curving the amount, but it's still in the wrong direction, then you need to change the path that you're swinging. You're over shallowing out the club, maybe. So if you get it to draw and it's just starting too far right and not curving back enough, right, then you're over shallowing it, and you need to go back. This is what Clay talks about in the 20-minute shallowing fix. We need to work through each step in the 20-minute shallowing fix. I feel like some people, they get through, not saying this is you, Ron, but this is what I've run into with a lot of people, is that they get to drill number 2 and they start hitting some great shots, right? But then they start overdoing it and basically kind of like what you're describing, right? It's hooking too much. It's hooking too much. Well, they skip drill number 3. Drill number 3 is where you dial it in. All right. So drill number 1, we're trying to excessively getting the face closed. If we can do that, then it's going to make it a lot easier to do drill number 2. Right. Drill number 2 is we're trying to excessively shallow it. Right. If we can do that, then it's going to be much easier to tone it down in drill number 3. So don't stop at drill number 2. Once you get a few good shots, don't stop there. You got to go to drill number 3. That's where you dial it in. That's where Clay goes over how to hone it in to get whatever shot you're looking for. Ron goes on to say, I'm considering flattening to mean into out club path and equating shaft lean with closing the face. No, so you don't need to. And also what we want to understand as well is that shaft lean opens the face and release closes the face. So you wouldn't actually, if your face is too closed, right, you wouldn't actually be sacrificing shaft lean. And by that, I mean, you mean losing shaft lean. You would actually need to get more shaft lean to accommodate a too closed face. That's kind of what I was talking about. Like if you have a strong grip and you bow the wrist, there's no really amount of shaft lean that you can have that's going to be able to accommodate that face, right? The face is still going to be too close. So if you have a very strong grip, you're going to need to not bow. You can't really bow your wrist. That's not going to work. Not saying that's what you're doing, but you can't create enough shaft lean to accommodate how closed the face is, right? So if you have like I said, another way, this is a more difficult way. And this is not something that you're just going to be able to just suddenly do. It's something that you have to train, like going to the gym. If you are trying to change your release pattern, it's not something that can just happen overnight or in one quick drill. It's something that you have to train over time, and you got to gradually kind of move it toward that way, right? So yeah, one way you can change the club face is with the release, right? So if you have, this is rare, but if you have too much shaft lean, right? Um, and let's say the face is too open. I've seen this every now and then, where I have a friend that was slicing the ball, and I looked at his face on view. I mean, I'm not kidding you. He looked like this at impact. I mean, a lot of us would kill to have this much shaft lean, right? And he had that much shaft lean, and he had so much shaft lean that he couldn't get the face closed. So he was just kind of hitting low slices out there. And I told him, like, I want you to come into contact, and I want you to stand tall, and I want you to throw that club hard. I want you to kind of stop your body and throw that club hard. Now, most golfers, if you told them that would not be a good thing. 99% of golfers, that would not be a good thing. But for him, it was a great thing. It got him to be in this kind of position, right? Where he's squaring up the face and he still has tons of shaft lean, right? And he was able to hit the ball higher and straighter, doing that. That's rare, but that can happen sometimes. Usually it's the opposite that's the problem, right? You get somebody that's hooking the ball and they're releasing the club early. And a way that you can fix that is getting more shaft lean. But that's a very difficult thing to change in the swing. It takes time. It's not something you're just going to be able to take to the course tomorrow, right? And start doing it, right? It's much easier to release the club earlier, to intentionally do that, than it is to release the club later with intention. It's just, a lot of people just cannot do that. If it was easy enough to do that, then everyone would do that. So yeah, I think you're kind of thinking the opposite on the shaft lean there, from what it sounds like. I'll get to you, Dr. Dale, but I just wanted to read Ron's comment here. It says, okay, this makes sense. I think I was confusing shaft lean with wrist movement. I will keep the shaft lean without closing the face. Thanks. Yeah, that sounds like you're on the right track. Yeah, so like I said, if you're hooking it, I would just weaken the grip. Probably be the easiest thing to do. If you're bowing the wrist a ton and you're actually more comfortable with having a flatter wrist, then I'd probably do that. It depends on just what exactly you're doing to get that too close to the face. So Dr. Dale says, I have recently discovered a horrible habit of separating my hands from the grip at the top of my backswing, probably thinking I'm improving on lag. As a result, I didn't have a firm grip at contact. Any pressure points I can emphasize to assure solid grip at impact? So first, I would make sure that you just have a proper grip to begin with. So we'll go over that first. And then what I would look at is just trying to get into a good position at the top. Because typically when I see people separating their hands, it's either because they have a poor grip to begin with that basically enables them to do that, or they're really flaring their arm, right? They're flaring their elbow, getting their elbows really far apart, or trying to create a ton of lag at the top, which it sounds like that maybe it's going to try to create a ton of lag at the top. Your hands may tend to separate because your right arm can't move like that, right? So first and foremost, grip. What do we need to do with the grip? So with the grip, what you want to think about with your lead hand is that the club is going to go through a little bit of your hand and a little bit of your fingers, right? So it's going to be kind of going through like that. So below the base of your pointer, above the base of your pinky, right? So if you look there, below the base of my pointer and above the base of my pinky. So if you think about, there's usually a crease, right, that separates your thumb and your hand. So basically right below my ring, my wedding ring here, there's going to be a crease right there, right? And you have that on all your fingers. So when you hold the club, it's going to be below that crease on the pointer and above that crease on the pinky. And that's whether you have a strong, weak grip where your hand's more on top, or a weaker grip where your grip's more on the side, right? So that works either or. It's just where your hand is rotated. So you're going to hold it in your more like this if you have a stronger grip, and you have to have a weaker grip, you're going to hold it more like this, but it's still in the same place in your fingers. It's just where your hand is positioned on the grip, all right? So that's how the lead hand goes on there. Oh, lastly, you don't want to have a big separation between your thumb and your hand, right? The reason is that if we have a big separation there, right? Let's say I'm like this. Well, then that's going to make my club kind of move all over the place, right? So I want to have those close together. It's like if I was to hand somebody something, that's how I want it. If I were to hand you this pen, right? That's how I'm handing it to you, right? See how my thumb's like that? I'm not going to have it. I'm not going to hand it to you like this, right? I'm going to hand it like that's the most intuitive thing. So that's kind of how you want to hold the club in your hand. And the reason why we don't want to have it too much in the fingers is that if we do, then it's going to be difficult to do that part, right? We're going to end up with a long thumb, right? And I don't want to have it too much in my hand because if I do, then I can't hinge it very well. So if I have it a little bit in the hands, a little bit in the fingers, it gives me the good combination. Once I have good grip coverage here, it's grip security, right? And I can hinge it nicely, right? With my trail hand, right? You got to think about you have this meaty part on your heel part of your hand, then you have this meaty part in the thumb part. If you squeeze those together, you can see how that creates a crease. So this crease right here, I either want it to be on top of or on the side of my left thumb or my lead thumb, right? On the top of or on the side of my lead thumb. So to know on which side you want to be is really dependent on if you need the club face to be a little bit more closed or a little bit more open. So if you tend to leave the face open, then I would definitely put it more on the side. This is going to be where most people are going to be, right? If you're someone who tends to have the face too closed, then having it a little bit more on top of the thumb would be where you want to be, right? And again, with my right hand, I don't want to have a big gap in between my thumb and my hand. I want to have it fairly close together, right? So if I put my left hand on there, I'm going to put my right hand on there the same way. And I recommend for pretty much all golfers to either have an interlock grip like this or an overlap grip. And I would say if you're someone who tends to separate your hands, then the interlock is going to be a little bit more secure, right? Because if you're overlapping, then it's much easier to separate your hands, right? If I'm interlocking, it's much more difficult. It's more locked in, right? So that's why I tend to recommend this to most people. But for some people, this feels really awkward and weird, and this may feel a lot better. So the overlap would be just where you kind of take your pinky and rest it in between your middle finger and your pointer finger, right? So sorry, I wasn't trying to give anybody the bird there, but just trying to show how that works, right? So generally, I recommend this. Now, if you are a golfer that really struggles with club head speed, and you are junior, lady, not very strong, that sort of thing, having a 10-finger grip is totally fine. Just want to make sure those hands are close together, right? I'm totally fine with that. But generally, I recommend most golfers do this interlock. That'd be kind of my preference. And again, whether I'm more stronger or weaker, my hands are going to go on there the same way. Again, my right hand can go more on the side if I need the face to be a little more closed, or more on top if I need it to be a little bit more open. But again, I don't want to have a big gap here because then this is going to want to move around, right? So secure grip, that's number one. All right. Number two would be I would kind of look at your arms, your structure of your arms at the top. Typically, when the hands separate, it's because of poor structure, right? Outside of grip, it's typically what it is. So the biggest reason I see is people really flare out that right elbow, and when you do that, your right hand or your left hand is going to want to separate from the grip, right? Because most of us don't have the wrist flexibility to be able to keep them on there, right? So if you get here, if I go to the top and I kind of spread my elbows apart, I'm having a hard time keeping my hands on the club. They're wanting to separate from the club, right? So we want to have our elbows closer together at the top. Now you can see I feel much more secure in my grip. A drill that you can do for that is the ball drill. This is now there are training aids out there that you can overpay for. The Tour Striker Smart Ball, I think is a great training aid. But you can just use a ball instead. I think it's like a $50 training aid, whereas this is like $3. Put it between your elbows and then make swings. You go up to the top, keep it between your elbows. The better part about the Tour Striker thing is it has a lanyard on it. So when you drop it, it just drops and hangs around your neck, right? Whereas this doesn't. Right. This, if you drop it, it's going to bounce on the ground. You have to pick it up. So if that's worth $50 to you, then by all means. But if it's not, then I got this at Target in the toy section. Basically, you want around a 6-inch diameter ball. So it's about 6 inches in thickness here, and it's got a little bit of squish to it, right? Um, and yeah, and you may have to dig to find one that doesn't have like Disney princesses on it or something. But I managed to find like a solid red one. But toy section at about any store like Target or like that will have typically like a ball pit where you can find something like that. You may already have something in your garage that can work. So that would be one, keeping the elbows closer together. And the last thing is, which it kind of sounds like this may be applying to you because it sounds like you're trying to create the lag at the top of the swing, which can work, but it's generally not what I recommend for most golfers. And it's also going to tend to lead if you try to overdo it. So if you're trying to create as much hingeage as you can at the top, again, my arms can't really work that way. So they're going to want to separate, right? So I generally like to see around a 90-degree angle between your lead arm and the shaft at the top. And then that angle gets a little bit sharper as you come down and shallow out the club and you get the change of direction, right? That's what creates the lag. Right here, this is where the max lag position is in the downswing. That's when the lag is going to be the sharpest. It's not going to be at the top of the swing. It's going to be down here, right? Now, there are golfers that have, like Louis Oosthuizen, right? He is a golfer that has a sharp angle up here, and then he even increases it in the downswing, but it doesn't really usually work that way for most golfers. Most golfers, once they reach that sharpest angle here, they will throw it out to start the downswing, right? They'll start casting. So what I would try to feel like is you're wide, 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 and then you create that angle in the downswing, and then you go. So if you do that, that will help with the hand separation. All right, we got about 20 minutes left. We got any more questions? If you're just jumping on here, I'm just waiting for more questions to be asked. We got a little more than 15 minutes left here. I'll stay on right up until 4. So if y'all got more questions, I'll be happy to answer them. So Rick says, I'm very inconsistent with my wedges, which are 15 years old. How can I determine if it's the wedges or me? Well, I can tell you it's probably not. I'm not trying to be mean, but it's probably you. Um, you know, your wedges now, unless there's just like they're just like totally bare, right? There's no, um, no grooves at all. Basically, they're like grooveless wedges. Then they're not really going to be inconsistent because of the equipment. It's going to be more you. So what I would look at when you're looking at typically when someone says they're inconsistent, it really just means that they're having trouble controlling the 4 major variables of impact, right? So number one is ball first contact, right? Or controlling the ground contact. So basically controlling the bottom of the swing and where that is, right? So that's number one, right? If in these are in order of importance, by the way. And the reason why that's the most important one is because if you chunk the ball, it doesn't matter where you hit it on the face. It doesn't matter if you're coming over the top. It doesn't matter because you chunked it, right? So it could have been, a pull had you hit it solidly, but because you chunked it, it doesn't really go anywhere. So that's priority number one. Number two is where you strike it on the face, right? Because that affects both the distance that it goes and the direction that it goes, right? So if you hit the ball on the toe, it's not going to transfer as much energy to the ball, and it's not going to go as far, right? And also, the ball's going to go more to the right, and it's going to tend to draw more or fade less than it normally would. We don't need to get into why that is, but that's what happens when you hit it off the heel. Excuse me, it's going to, again, not go as far because the face is twisting, and also there's less club head speed on the heel of the club than there is on the center, or even less so than on the toe. But you're also going to it's going to fade more or draw less than normally. Now, typically, if you get too far in the heel with the wedges, also the other bad things happen, like the S words, right? The hosel rockets. So that's the second piece. The third piece is the club face direction, the direction the club face is pointing at impact, right? We need to have that pointing in the correct direction, right? So if you're inconsistent, it may have to do with your ability to get your face lined up where it needs to be at impact. And then lastly, the path of the club, right? So that's the direction the club is swinging through impact. So that's into out, out to in, that sort of thing. So those would be the things that I would be looking at with your inconsistency. So think about that. And if you don't know, then go to the range and hit some wedge shots, or even better, this would actually be better. Go play a couple rounds of golf, and then when you hit your wedge shot, just write down on the scorecard or have a notepad or something. Just write down what happened. Like, okay, chunked, ball went 30 yards, because I chunked it, right? Or hit it, hit this one off the toe, missed short and right. And then maybe flush this one, but it ended up left of my target, right? So I would record, what happens in your play, and then what you're going to notice is there's going to be tendencies. There's going to be patterns, right? You're going to see, oh, okay, well, most of the time when I hit a bad wedge shot, it's because of X or Y, right? And then you can attack those things. So it's about peeling back the onion. I know it's easy to kind of think like, oh, it's just my wedge is really old. It's 15 years old. And, this wedge here, right? I had this wedge in college, which means that it's almost 20 years old. And I will tell you that I could go out with this wedge and hit fine shots with it. Yeah, the grooves are worn down a little bit. I probably wouldn't get quite as much spin with it, but I could hit just as good as shots with this wedge as the newer wedges that are in my bag. So it's not likely that it's the wedges. It's more likely that you're just having trouble controlling the variables of impact. That's the much more likely scenario. So I would think about what those misses are. Now the other thing is it could be a skill problem, right? So what I mean by that is maybe you are flushing your wedges, right? You're making perfectly ball first contact. You are hitting the ball dead in the center of the face. The ball is going directly toward the target, but the distance is wrong, right? It's inconsistent. The distance is inconsistent. So what that means is that you need to develop the skill of varying the speed at which you hit the ball with your wedges, right? So so if you're having trouble being consistent, knowing how far to or how hard to hit a ball that's 60 yards versus a ball that's 80 yards with your wedge, then that's a skill that you need to develop. All right. Now, what I recommend doing if it's something that's new to you is I recommend starting with what we call the clock system. Clay talks about this in the wedge series on the website, the Tuscany Golf Wedge System. And basically what the clock system is thinking of your lead arm as an arm on the clock, right? So this would be like a 7:30 swing. This would be a 9 o'clock swing. And then this would be like a 10:30 swing, right? So the key with this is to have pretty much the same rhythm and tempo, right? So what I wouldn't want to do is have my 9, or let's say this is kind of like my 8 o'clock swing kind of look like this, and then my 7:30 swing look like this, right? Well, that swings way, the tempo is way faster, right? I want to have the same rhythm and tempo whether I'm taking a 730 swing or a 1030 swing. The speed is going to be higher with the 1030 swing because I'm generating it over a longer period of time. It's like going sledding. If I want to go sledding, if I want to have the most speed at the bottom, I'm going to find the tallest and steepest hill. If I want to go really slow at the bottom, I'm going to find a short and flatter hill, right? So it's the same thing, right? I'm only bringing the club to here. I'm only going to be able to generate that amount of speed. If I'm bringing the club up to here, right, and I come through with the same effort and energy, I'm going to have more speed on it because I'm building it up over a longer period of time, right, or a longer space. So same kind of thing. So what I would do is I would take, your wedge, and I would see how far you hit a 730 swing, how far you hit a 9 o'clock swing, and how far you hit a 1030 swing, right? Then what I would do is another way that you can control the distance with the speed is to choke up on the club. If I choke up on the club, my club head is effectively going to go a little bit slower because the lever is going to be shorter, right? So it's the same reason why the tips of the fan blades move faster than the inner portions of the fan blades, right? Because the tips of the fan blades, that's a longer lever arm. There's going to be more speed there, right? The inner portions are going to move slower. So when you choke up on the club, that makes the tool shorter, which makes the speed takes off a little bit, right? And this is also something you can use if you're in between clubs. People always ask me, what do you need to do? Let's say I'm in between clubs. Do I try to take off, like swing slower, swing easier, or swing harder with the lower club? And the answer is to do neither of those. The answer, there are situations where you might do one or the other of those, but typically the answer is to take the longer club and choke up on it a little bit and just take a full swing, like a normal swing, like you normally would, right? Because that's going to take a little bit off of it, right? So you do the same thing with your wedges, right? So let's say I found out that, with my wedge, if I take a 9 o'clock swing, that goes 70 yards, right? Well, what I can do is if I have a 65-yard shot, what I can do is I can try to swing just a little bit short of my 9 o'clock swing. So I would just maybe swing to here with the full length of the club. Or what I can do is I can take a 9 o'clock swing and I can just choke up on the club a little bit to take a little bit off. So what I would see is how much it takes off whenever you choke up an inch, whenever you choke up 2 inches, whenever you choke up all the way down to the middle, how much does that take off? And then I would get an idea of how far those go. Over time, you're also going to develop a feel for how hard to hit these shots, right? And what exactly you need to do. What an 80-yard swing feels like. What a 60-yard that comes with building skill. A way that you can build that skill. There's several ways you can do it. There's lots of launch monitors these days that you can set, that you can get, and you can set the you can have it tell you like a random yardage to go for in a certain range. So you can set it up to say, okay, I want you to give me a yardage between 40 and 110 yards, and I want it to be random. So it's going to give you one, 79 yards. And it's going to come in, it'll say 62 yards. And it'll come in and say, 54 yards. And it'll come in and say, it's going to have, it's going to give you a different one every single time. That's a really great way because that matches what's going on the course. If you can get really good, if you've ever seen those TrackMan videos where, Dustin Johnson's on there and he hits a shot and he's guessing what the yardage is going to be. And a lot of times they're on it within like less than a yard. They're so good, they're so in tune, and they're so highly skilled, and they have such a feel for the shot that they're able to tell you exactly what the yardage is, right? So that's a way you can kind of develop that. If you don't have a launch monitor, one way that you can do it is with a deck of playing cards, right? You take the face cards out and then you draw a card. If it's a 4, that's a 40-yard shot. You try to hit a 40-yard shot. You draw another card. If it's a 6, you hit a 60-yard shot. If you hit a 10, you get a 100-yard shot. What you can also do is you can make to where the red cards, you could say, are the number plus 0 with a 0, or you can say the black cards are a number with a 5. So if you draw a red 4, that's 40. If you draw a black 5, that's 45, right? And then you're getting more increments in there, right? And then you can play a game trying to hit to those yardages. At the course that we shoot some videos at, Heathrow Country Club near here in Orlando, they just put in a wedge range. You can urge your club or driving range to put it in a wedge range, and basically it's just they just have every 10 yards they have a different yardage, right? So and then they'll put like a thing on it that says like 40. So I think ours starts at 30, right? So they have like a 4x4 like concrete thing that they put in there that says 30 yards on it, and basically you hit balls until you try to get it to land on it. Then they have a 40 and a 50 and a 60 and a 70, and they just kind of have them scattered throughout the range. It's not all in one line. Some places will have it all in one line. I like the one at Heathrow that there's one over here to the left, because then it helps you to adapt more of what's going on the course. Because on the course, you're not going to stay in the same stance and hit down the same target line, right? You're going to have a different target every single time. So on this one, you're going left a little bit, then you're going right, then you're going, you're switching back and forth. It's kind of more all over the place, right? And then also what they have is they have ropes that give you the ideal launch angle, right? So they have a top rope, which would be at the top of the range, which would be like 30 degrees. Then they have one that's below that's 27-degree launch. And ideally, what you'd want to do is you'd want to get the ball to go in between those ropes, a little bit below the top one, a little bit above the top one, or above the bottom one. And that's the launch angle that the tour players hit it at, right? And what they found is that launch angle is generally going to be the easiest to control for most golfers, right? So you can urge them to install something like that. That's a really great way to help you to improve your wedge game. So, when you say that you're inconsistent with your wedges, it's really an extremely broad statement. What if you want me to give you like a concise answer and tell you exactly what you want to do, peel back the onion and try to think about what I've said today, and peel back the onion of what I've talked about. Where are you hitting the ground in relationship to the ball? Are you hitting the ground at all, right? Where are you hitting it on the club face? Ways that you can check where you're hitting on the club face is to use foot power spray, or use something called the dot method. The dot method is where you take like a dry erase washable marker, you fill up a dimple on the ball with the ink, and then you set up the ball to where it rubs off on the face. You hit it, and then you see the dot on your club face where you're hitting it. All right. I recommend like the Expo dry erase markers with the bullet tip. That's what works the best. What I found, that's what I prefer for checking strike location, unless it's a driver. If it's a driver, I like to use the foot power spray. Most of the drivers these days have really dark metal faces, and it makes it difficult to see the dots when you do the dot method. Foot power spray works really well. You can use foot power spray for irons as well, but it doesn't work quite as well. It can rub off if you take a divot or something like that. So I prefer the dot method for irons and the foot power spray for driver. All right. Look at, let's say you are making ball first contact, center face contact. Look at where the ball is starting, how much it's curving, and where it ends up, right? And look at your tendencies. Now, if you're doing all those things really well, you're hitting it straight at the target and all that, and the balls, it's the distance is the issue, then you need to develop the skill of controlling the distance. And that's how you're going to get more consistent. So peel back that onion and figure out what the actual problem is, and then go from there. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll be back here tomorrow, Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to y'all next time.